Daniel was a good man. He loved God very much. The king Darius trusted Daniel. He saw Daniel was wise and honest. Daniel was a faithful servant of the king. Darius chose Daniel for an important job. But some men were jealous of Daniel. They didn't like that Daniel was close to the king. They wanted to get rid of Daniel. They wanted to hurt him. The jealous men thought of a plan, a bad plan. They had been watching Daniel for a long time, and they knew he was favored by King Darius. This made them envious and resentful. They wanted to find a way to bring him down, to tarnish his reputation and remove him from his position of influence. They gathered in secret, whispering and scheming, their minds racing with malicious intent. They knew Daniel prayed to God every day. It was a part of his routine, a sacred practice he never missed. Morning, noon, and night, Daniel would kneel and pray, giving thanks and seeking guidance. His unwavering faith was well known, and it was this very faith that the men decided to exploit. They saw it as a weakness, a vulnerability they could use to their advantage. They thought, we can trick the king. They believed they could manipulate King Darius, who trusted Daniel implicitly. The men knew that the king's ego was his Achilles' heel. If they could appeal to his vanity, they might be able to convince him to pass a decree that would ensnare Daniel. Their faces lit up with cunning smiles as they formulated their deceitful plan. We can use Daniel's faith against him. They were confident that Daniel's devotion to his God would be his undoing. The men discussed the details, refining their plot to ensure it would be foolproof. They would propose a law that would force Daniel to choose between his faith and his loyalty to the king. It was a cruel and calculated move designed to trap Daniel in an impossible situation. They went to King Darius. With their plan in place, the men approached the king with a sense of urgency and determination. They knew they had to act quickly before Daniel could catch wind of their scheme. As they walked through the grand halls of the palace, they rehearsed their lines, preparing to present their case to the king. "Oh, great king," they said, "you are so powerful. You are the greatest." They flattered the king. They showered him with praise, appealing to his sense of grandeur and authority. The men knew that by stroking his ego, they could make him more receptive to their proposal. They bowed deeply, their voices dripping with insincere admiration. They wanted him to like their idea. They needed the king's approval to set their plan in motion. The men watched his face closely, hoping to see signs of interest and agreement. They knew that if they could get the king on their side, their plot would be unstoppable. Their hearts raced with anticipation as they awaited his response. They said, "You should make a new law, a law that says no one can pray to any god except you for 30 days. They presented their idea with conviction, making it sound like a brilliant and necessary decree. They argued that it would unify the kingdom and solidify the king's power. The men spoke with such confidence that it was hard to see through their deceit. A law that says no one can pray to any god except you for 30 days. The king listened intently, his interest piqued. The idea of being the sole recipient of prayers and devotion appealed to his vanity. He imagined the entire kingdom bowing to him, acknowledging his supreme authority. The men could see the wheels turning in his mind, and they knew they were close to achieving their goal. The king liked being praised. He enjoyed the flattery and the idea of being the center of attention. The thought of everyone in the kingdom praying to him was intoxicating. The men had played their cards well, and the king was falling right into their trap. His smile grew wider as he considered their proposal. He didn't realize it was a trap for Daniel. The king was so caught up in the praise and the grandiosity of the idea that he failed to see the true motive behind it. He didn't suspect that the men were using him as a pawn in their scheme to destroy Daniel. The king's trust in his advisors and his desire for adulation blinded him to the danger that lay ahead. Daniel heard about the new law. It was a decree that no one could pray to any god or man except the king for 30 days. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the lion's den. The news spread quickly and everyone was talking about it. Daniel, a man of great faith, knew this law was aimed at him because of his devotion to God, but he was not afraid. Daniel had faced many challenges before, and his faith had always seen him through. He knew that his relationship with God was more important than any earthly decree. His heart was filled with peace and determination as he decided to continue his daily prayers. He knew God was stronger than any king or any law. Daniel believed that God's power and love were far greater than the threats of men. He had seen God's hand in his life many times, and he trusted that God would protect him now. His faith was unshakable and his resolve was firm. He went home and opened his window. This was not an act of defiance, but a continuation of his daily routine. Daniel always prayed with his windows open, facing Jerusalem. It was his way of staying connected to his homeland and his God. He knew that people might see him, but he did not care. He knelt down and prayed to God. The sunlight streamed in, filling the room with warmth and light. Daniel's heart was full of gratitude. As he thanked God for his many blessings, he prayed for wisdom, strength, and protection. He knew that God was with him, and that gave him great comfort. He prayed just like he did every day. He thanked God. Daniel's prayers were sincere and heartfelt. He poured out his soul to God, expressing his fears and hopes. He knew that God listened to every word, and that gave him peace. His faith was a source of strength and serenity. He asked God for help. Daniel knew that he could not face this challenge alone. He needed God's guidance and protection. He prayed for courage to stand firm in his faith, no matter what happened. He trusted that God would deliver him from the hands of his enemies. He knew God was always listening. Daniel's faith was built on the knowledge that God was always present, always attentive. He believed that his prayers were heard and that God would answer them in his own time and way. This assurance gave him a deep sense of peace and confidence. The jealous men were watching. They saw Daniel praying. They were happy. These men had been looking for a way to trap Daniel, and now they had found it. They knew that Daniel's faithfulness to his God would lead him to break the king's decree. They watched with satisfaction, knowing that they could now accuse him. They ran to the king and said, "Your Majesty, Daniel is breaking your law." They were eager to report Daniel's actions, hoping to see him punished. They believed that this was their chance to get rid of him once and for all. They approached the king with a sense of urgency and excitement. He is praying to his God. They accused Daniel with confidence, knowing that the king's decree was clear. They expected the king to be angry and to order Daniel's immediate punishment. They were certain that they had finally succeeded in their plot against him. The king liked Daniel. He didn't want to punish him, but the law was the law. He had to do something. The king said, "Take Daniel to the lion's den, throw him in." The lion's den was a pit. It was dark and scary. Hungry lions lived there. The king was sad, but he had to follow his own law. He hoped God would save Daniel. He told Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." That night the king couldn't sleep. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more troubling than the last. He tossed and turned, his heart heavy with worry and fear. The darkness of the night seemed to mirror the darkness of his thoughts. He was worried about Daniel. The king had grown fond of Daniel, who was known for his wisdom and unwavering faith. The thought of Daniel spending the night in the lion's den was unbearable. He couldn't shake off the image of those fierce beasts and what they might do to his trusted advisor. As the first light of dawn broke, the king hurried to the lion's den. His steps were quick, driven by a mix of hope and dread. The early morning air was cool, but the king's anxiety made him oblivious to the chill. He had to know if Daniel had survived the night. "Daniel! Daniel!" the king called out, his voice echoing off the rocky walls of the den. His heart pounded in his chest as he waited for a response. The silence that followed was deafening, each second feeling like an eternity. "Are you alive? Did your God save you?" The king's voice was filled with desperation and hope. He knew of Daniel's faith in his God, but he also knew the ferocity of the lions. The question hung in the air, a plea for a miracle. To his surprise, Daniel answered. The king's heart leapt with joy and relief. He could hardly believe his ears. Daniel's voice was strong and clear, a testament to his survival. "My God sent his angel," Daniel said, his voice filled with conviction. "He shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me." Daniel's faith had been rewarded, and his God had proven his power once again. The angel shut the lions' mouths. The fierce creatures that had once been a symbol of fear and death were now lying peacefully, their mouths closed, unable to harm Daniel. It was a sight that filled the king with awe and gratitude. "They did not hurt me." The king was overjoyed. His heart swelled with happiness and relief. He had witnessed a miracle, and his faith in Daniel's God was strengthened. He ordered his servants to lift Daniel out of the den. Daniel was safe. The king's command was swift, and his servants rushed to help Daniel out of the den. The sight of Daniel emerging unharmed was a moment of triumph and joy. He didn't even have a scratch. God had protected him. Daniel's skin was unmarked, a testament to the divine protection he had received. The king's heart was filled with gratitude and reverence for the God who had saved Daniel. The king was very angry with the jealous men. He realized they had tricked him. He ordered them to be thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. The lions were very hungry. They jumped on the wicked men and ate them up. The king then made a new law. He told everyone in his kingdom, "You must respect Daniel's God. He is the living God. He is the true God. His kingdom will never end and his power will never stop." Daniel's story teaches us many important lessons. We learn that God protects those who truly love him. We learn that even when we face difficult times, we should never stop trusting in God. We learn that with faith in God, we can overcome any challenge. And most importantly, we learn that God can turn our biggest trials into amazing triumphs.